So, Europe is facing a new kind of threat. We're talking about hypersonic missiles, weapons that move so fast they make our current defense systems look like they're practically standing still. And as the continent scrambles to protect itself, two completely different solutions are bubbling to the surface. One is this massive, multi-billion euro shield up in space, and the other? It's a mysterious and honestly pretty controversial algorithm that claims it can see the future.
All right, so here's what we're going to break down today. First, we have to talk about the hypersonic threat itself. What makes it so scary? Then we'll get into the hardware solution, this incredible high-tech shield in the sky. After that, we're diving into the software, a predictive oracle with a really strange backstory. And finally, we'll put them head to head and look at these two competing visions for the future of European defense.
Okay, let's get right into it. To really understand the solutions, you first have to appreciate the sheer scale of the problem we're dealing with. And believe me, this isn't just about missiles getting a little bit faster. This is a fundamental shift in the entire rulebook of modern warfare. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. Over 1.7 kilometers every single second. At that kind of speed, a weapon can zip across entire countries in just a few minutes, all while maneuvering and changing course. This insane velocity creates a brand new, massive challenge for any defense system that's trying to shoot it down. You see, this speed creates a huge problem: uncertainty. It's something called the latency gap. And as you can see here, if you have just a 30-second delay in spotting one of these things, it's already 50 kilometers away from where you first saw it. 50! Trying to hit a moving target with that much built-in error? It's a near impossible shot. You basically need a whole new way of seeing. So how in the world do you solve a problem like that? Well, the first answer is a gigantic engineering project. Europe is literally building a high-tech shield in space called Odin's Eye 2. You can think of it as a kind of celestial tripwire. The whole idea revolves around this concept: Space-Based Missile Early Warning, or SBMEW. The plan is to use satellites with really advanced infrared sensors to spot the intense heat of a missile launch from orbit the very second it happens. This gives you the absolute earliest warning possible, and that's how you close that dangerous latency gap we were just talking about. And make no mistake, this is no small project. Just look at the program phases here, and you can see how fast this thing escalated. It started out as a pretty modest 7.5 million euro study. Now, with Odin's Eye 2, it's jumped to almost 100 million euros. And that's just to design the system and build a simulator. The next phase, called Joule, is projected to cost over €500 million just to get the first satellites up and running. Now, to pull this off, the system uses this really complex, multi-layered net of satellites. It's pretty cool, actually. You can see it here. It's not just one type of satellite, but three, and each one has a very specific job. You've got the high-altitude geosatellites that give a constant wide-area stare. Then you have these elliptical HEO satellites that cover the polar regions, which have always been a kind of blind spot. And finally, you have a whole constellation down in low Earth orbit to do the super high-res, low-latency tracking you need to follow a fast-moving target. But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. Building something this complex takes a lot of time. The first bits of this hardware shield aren't even expected to be working until the early 2030s. And that leads to a pretty critical question. Is there another way? A different path? This brings us to a radically different idea: a mysterious, predictive algorithm known as RALF1, the software oracle. I mean, what if instead of just reacting faster to an attack, you could actually predict it before it even happens? This is the wild promise of a pretty controversial software tool that's been quietly making the rounds in Ukrainian defense circles. And this is where it all started. Not in some high-tech defense lab, but with this, a Russian software registration from back in 2011. The program is called Reflection on Actions of Lorenz Forces 1, or just RALF1 for short. And get this, it wasn't designed for war. It was originally built for geophysics. Right from the start, though, this tool has been completely shrouded in controversy. As you can see from this quote, Ukraine's own Ministry of Education and Science took a look at it and basically concluded it's impossible to validate scientifically. They even called it pseudoscientific because its inner workings are a total black box. And that's a huge problem in the military. I mean, if you don't know how an algorithm gets to a prediction, how can you ever trust it when actual lives are on the line? So how on earth does a pseudo-scientific black box algorithm even get considered for national defense? Well, let's trace its very strange journey from searching for oil fields to predicting on battlefields, and really dig into this dual-use nature of RALF1. Yeah, this algorithm really does live a double life. On the geophysics side, its creators claim it can find oil reserves buried under a kilometer of solid granite with over 85% accuracy. But then, on the geopolitics side, that same core logic is used to try and predict the intensity of bombardments. It claims to model something called nonlinear information fields, which is a fancy way of saying it finds predictive patterns in these huge, chaotic messes of data that no human analyst could ever hope to spot.
So why would anyone adopt it with all this skepticism? Well, a strategic memo that argued for its use had this really powerful analogy. It basically said that refusing to use RALF1 is like being a ship's captain sailing through dense fog with nothing but an old paper map. Meanwhile, you've got this high-resolution sonar system sitting on the deck that can supposedly see all the dangers right in front of you, but you refuse to turn it on because you don't fully understand how the electronics work. It's a tough call.
And all of this brings us to a fundamental choice about the future of defense. Do you invest everything in building an impenetrable wall, or do you focus your energy on learning how to read the signs of what's coming next? So here they are side by side. Odin's Eye, the shield, is this huge, tangible hardware project. It's all about detection and tracking, building a better, faster physical defense. Then you have RLF1, the Oracle, which is an intangible software tool based entirely on prediction. It's all about finding patterns to see events before they happen. You know, on the surface, they're complete opposites, a hardware fortress versus a software crystal ball. And that leaves us with the big question for the future of security. Is it going to depend on bigger, more powerful hardware, like Odin's Eye, built over decades at an incredible cost? Or will things shift towards smarter, faster, and more controversial predictive software like Ralph 1? You know, maybe the real question isn't which one to choose, but how they might actually work together. Could a predictive oracle tell the celestial shield exactly where and when it needs to look? Right now, Europe is betting big on the shield, but the oracle, well, the oracle is definitely knocking at the door.